Thank you for being part of what's a fantastic summit. It's been a great experience. Let me try to put a little bit of a finer point on kind of the thinking and analysis that led up to the project, our process, and a little bit more detail on the project. So just a quick note on organization. For those of you who were at the earlier session, I talked about how EDC structure worked. Center for Economic Transformation is one of the five kind of front-facing divisions at EDC, and they do a range of work around, particular industries, supporting those industries, growing them, creating new businesses, creating new jobs. And the early thinking around the applied science campus really came out of that group. And it started with really a financial crisis that really led to a real soul searching for the city about what its economic future was. The fiscal crisis hit us particularly hard in the areas of finance, insurance, and real estate, which is one of the backbones of New York and comprise about 40% of our tax revenue. We realized from a resiliency, an economic resiliency perspective, and a forward-looking economic perspective that we needed to think more broadly about the future of our city and think about an economic diversification strategy. That process lasted a year. It was a thorough, in-depth, outreach-oriented process we called Game Changers, and it was really the crux of it was, what are the big moves that the city can make to position it for growth in the future? We talked with businesses, we talked with academic leaders, we did a heck of a lot of outreach, trying to draw out the ideas of different experts. We heard a lot of things, but one recurring theme we heard was around applied sciences, around technology, around the city's position and its ability to capitalize on what everyone has recognized is a future trend. And so through the analysis that kind of ran in tandem with and followed a lot of that fact-finding effort, we learned some hard truths about where we were as a city compared to our American peer cities. We learned that we were on a per capita basis undersized for engineering firms. We were undersized for science and technology as a percent of the workforce, and we were undersized as tech of a percentage of the total economy. This is 2008. Even pre-Cornell, we're beginning to see shifts in that. It's just a growing economic engine. But at the time, this really set off a light bulb for us and really helped us begin to think about how do we shape a strategy that can make us more competitive and position us for the future in the longer term. We recognized that if we could get there, we would have benefits on multiple levels. If we could attract a university, we would have the benefits of a new anchor institution. There's popular thought right now, very prominent in the US, about this idea of the anchor institution, the academic institution, the health campus, really being the driver for economic success in particular areas and the city as a whole. So that was important. We saw that attracting a university that was focused on entrepreneurial activity and commercialization could help us generate new businesses, new lines of industry, and jobs. And now looking back on that in the context of the current administration that is very interested in equity, income equity and wage equity, we see really that strategy around tech really affirms that if you look at the spectrum of employment opportunities across tech, there's opportunities at the very high level and there's opportunities at entry level. So in short, we felt like if this is something we could harness, it would have a really big benefit for New York. So a little bit about our process. Coming out of the game changer exercise and the follow-up analysis we did to really understand the tech industry and our ability to be responsive to it, we sought to kind of lay out a vision for what we were trying to accomplish. And while we were doing that, we were looking at closely across globally, really, but over time focusing more in the Europe and the US about what type of university would be a good fit for New York City, would be a good fit in terms of what we were trying to add to our economy, would be a good fit overall, and would be a good fit for what we anticipated would be our longer-term financial contribution to support the university. And along those lines of support, after sort of looking at the landscape of academic institutions globally, we saw that really there was a very publicly supported model, the public type university, and then more on the private side. Our goal was really to find a university that we could provide the sort of the early investment and the property, and they could use that to leverage fundraising, to leverage philanthropic fundraising efforts, and then they could rise more on their own. And as a result of that, we steered more towards institutions that were less reliant on government and more reliant, self-reliant, and also reliant on fundraising. So all that thinking translated into requests for expressions of interest, which was really an early foray into the market, into the academic market, to understand who's out there, who's potentially interested, and to really refine our understanding of those institutions and what our project should look like. It was during that process that we began to look at individual sites. Never through our process did we dictate sites. We provided sites as options for respondents. So in the RFEI, we had 5 or so sites that we offered up to respondents to come back with proposals on. The Cornell site, the Roosevelt Island site being one of them. Something that we learned through that process was really something that's been a recurring theme, that the attraction of an academic institution to an urban place, yes, it's about the panache and the brand of that place, but if the university can't be integrally connected with the urban fabric, it's not going to work. So some of the sites that we had put forward, including Governor's Island, which you may have heard about I think it was in Joe's earlier presentation, was in the mix at the time. It was a historic military installation. It has the look and feel of a bucolic campus. It looks like it's just waiting for a university to move in. But it's an island, it's isolated, you reach it by ferry to Lower Manhattan. It needed a lot of investment, yes, but the critical piece we saw was that disconnect from the action and the energy of the city. So through that RFEI process, we received 18 proposals from 27 institutions. Some of them partnered up, which was resulted in the 18. We went through an interviewing process, an information gathering process that was through 2010. 2011, we issued an RFP, which laid out more specifically what we were willing to provide on the financial side, which was $100 million city capital support and property free and clear. Coming out of that RFP, we received 8 proposals with different visions for academic campuses. And then it was through our negotiation process. We modeled our negotiation process on typically how we negotiate real estate deals, which is the goal of which is to get to as hard of an agreement, a hard of a deal as you can before advancing into what needed to follow, which was an approvals process, zoning, entitlements. Our typical approach is to try and get an agreement as firm as we can with that private party. We found that to be a very successful model to implementing projects. We did it there. We spent a lot of time, and it was alluded to in the video, interviewing those respondents, negotiating with those respondents. And the fruit of that was an agreement with Cornell, which you saw the footage of. It was also, over time, we rolled out other projects with other institutions, both local and from outside the city, including New York University, including Columbia, and including a partnership between Carnegie Mellon, a university in Pittsburgh, and Steiner Studios, a film studio in Brooklyn. A little bit more on the proposal, or I should say on the project. So you heard about Roosevelt Island. Really, the Cornell's proposal is a very mixed-use campus. Yes, an academic campus. Yes, a graduate school, PhDs, but also very intimately tied into that commercialization piece. So there's commercial space, there'll be hotel space, there's executive education space, there's housing, and all of it fits together. But the goal of it really is to marry that academic research with that commercialization, which is really the key piece to business creation and economic growth. A little bit on partnerships. So Technion, the Technion Israel Institute was Cornell's partner in their proposal and still is. They are jointly working on programs and will have a joint degree. The project will serve about 560 students, and in phase one, ultimately 2,500 at full build. I mentioned housing. The site, the uniqueness of the site, both from a floodplain perspective and its narrowness, has really required a very interesting and innovative approach to open space that really intertwines through the campus and makes it a very a unique setting, but also one that isn't gated off from the city. Just a little bit more on the project. Phase one, which will begin to open in 2017, about 700,000 square feet. I'll talk a little bit more about the mix. Full build, about 2 million square feet. You can see the types of uses that will comprise that campus. More detail on development program. The only thing I'll say here is, along the lines of my comments earlier, that this is a long-term plan. It's a 30-year vision for this campus. It was very important to us and to Cornell to be able to achieve a real solid first phase within the first couple years, which is represented there in phase one. But then the project will roll out in phases over a 30-year period. Here's a little bit more detail on phase one. It's made up of 4 components. The academic building, the $100 million that we're providing will cover about 60% of the costs of that academic building, and the remainder is being provided by Cornell. Also in phase one is the commercial colo facility, phase one residential, which will be housing for students as well as academics, and then a hotel and executive education facility. 2017 will see delivered the academic facility, the colo, and the residential. As was mentioned, it was really important for Cornell to begin rolling out this program. This will really be, the Roosevelt Island will really be the box in which a very sophisticated program needs to be run. And so they began that work about now 3 years ago, operating out of the Google building, which is Google's East Coast headquarters. So just to wrap up, so in addition to the Cornell campus, we rolled out other agreements with institutions in New York and outside of New York. NYU's Center for Urban Science and Progress is really applying tech to questions around the urban environment. Columbia's Institute for Design Sciences, Data Sciences is really looking at data. And lastly, the Carnegie Mellon Steiner Studios partnership looking at the media and its relationship to tech. So you can see 2046, we anticipate really big benefits for the city. We have sort of began on a course that we think will reap very significant dividends and really could change the face of the city of New York. That's my presentation. Thank you.